the very best leaders are those that are most able to handle paradoxes.
Stay till the end to listen to us talk about the most valuable paradoxes that we can grapple.
In general, there is not a right answer at work. There are just choices and consequences. Every organisation's there to make money, isn't it, somehow? But we all know that money, isn't that just greed? The more something scares you, the more you should probably do it. I mean, we've had guests on the podcast who've been nervous, haven't we? Does it scare you being on the podcast?
Not so much.
You probably shouldn't do it. The more you hate something in someone else, the more likely you're avoiding it in yourself.
What are the most valuable ones to have an approach for in leadership and in our work?
One that I find fascinating in specifically leadership development is...
Hello, I'm Chris and welcome to Sparks, a series by Interactive Workshops. In every episode, we spark something in work and life. From how to spark humour to how to spark excellence, from how to spark, Jonna, a paradox.
Oh, Chris, a paradox? Is that really what we're sparking?
This is what we're sparking. I know it seems weird, but we're going to talk about the paradoxes that we have to handle in work and life, approaches to them. Why are we talking about this? We're going to get into that, and stay till the end to listen to us talk about the most valuable paradoxes that we can grapple.
The most valuable?
The most valuable.
And they're coming at the end?
Yeah, they're coming at the end.
Brilliant. Stay tuned.
So, before we get into it, Jonna, are you well?
Yes and no.
It's very fitting, paradoxical answer.
Yeah, well, Chris, I mean, we all have many strands to our life. Some of mine are going well, some not so much. I did mention this before the pod. My dog was sick this morning. But benefit, clearing up dog sick, a lot easier than humans or children. The sun is shining, but also I've been a little bit unwell recently. So there's yes and no. There isn't an easy answer to are you well?
No.
And there isn't for most people actually either. Most people are generally doing okay, but everybody has stuff that isn't going well. So when asked, how are you? What should we say?
Difficult question to answer, isn't it? And then we're trying to resolve that in our heads. Am I well? I want to be well or not well. I want to know whether I'm in bed sick or not.
Here's a paradox. Should you believe what someone said at a job interview? Because they've come to convince you to hire them. You are going to pay them to join your company. Surely someone that you're about... if you were bribing someone, you say, I'm going to bribe you to do something.
Yeah.
But by offering to pay them if they're successful, we're essentially bribing them to possibly not be completely candid.
Yeah. And they're definitely biased about themselves.
Well, I hope they're biased about themselves.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Because hopefully they've got confidence.
Yeah.
So in today's Sparks, we're going to explore the nature of paradoxes. But I thought I'd start with a few teasers.
Yeah, tease us out for us.
And tell you a little bit about what I did in my degree. But the teasers, for example, the more you try to impress somebody, the less impressed they'll be. We all know that someone's desperately trying to impress is not impressive. Whereas someone who is naturally impressive doesn't have to try. So this example, the more something scares you, the more you should probably do it. I mean, we've had guests on the podcast who've been nervous, haven't we? Does it scare you being on the podcast?
Not so much.
You probably shouldn't do it. Doesn't scare me, but they come full of passion and adrenaline, and it's good for them to come and do it.
Use.
The more you are afraid of death, the less you'll enjoy life. If you're constantly worried about the future and what might happen to you, what I really, really like, and I did a LinkedIn post on this, the more you learn, the more you realise how little you know. Commonly called the Dunning-Kruger effect, but if you don't know something about... When you first introduced me to Fantasy Premier League, I thought I must be able to do this, must be really easy. Got started, used up my bench boost and, my free hit
all
on
chips
week
early.
1.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I don't really know anything about this. I thought I was clever, but I didn't. I was actually just right at the start.
There's an
and
overconfidence.
3 years in, I now know how absolutely little I know about that.
And that's true of a lot of things in work and life.
Yeah. Another perhaps more deep one. The more you hate something in someone else, the more likely you're avoiding it in yourself. So, if there's let's say you really find someone arrogant, then you're probably diminishing your own arrogance. You're probably ignoring your own arrogance. This is like a Jungian theory.
Right.
But I think the complex nature of human beings and the complex nature of life means that grappling with these paradoxes is extremely valuable to us as human beings.
Yeah.
And we can see there economists, philosophers, psychologists, they like to grapple with these seemingly incompatible truths.
And this is the tension. This is why it's slightly a weird topic, because we normally spark good things, and you'd think we would spark solutions. Why might we spark a paradox and hold things in tension?
Well, I actually studied this in my degree in the cognitive science department of Exeter University. I had a brilliant philosophy lecturer who got me into, first of all, the idea of paradigms, Kuhn's different paradigms. And we talk about paradigm change. I think Kuhn identified 157 different types of paradigm.
Wow.
So when we talk about a mindset shift or a paradigm change, you could ask, which of the 157 types of paradigm shift are you looking for?
Yeah.
But this went on then into an exploration of different incompatible philosophical constructs. Some of them, this statement is false. We use that in our recruitment day, don't we? But this statement is false. If it's actually true, the statement is false. And if it's false, the statement is true. This is seemingly incompatible. And I then studied, various different philosophers. Gödel was one of my favorites, Kurt Gödel, who was deeply into this from a logical point of view. And then I was lucky enough to spend some time with on a work placement. In fact, one of our audience members is on a work placement today. And I was working with someone who's leading leadership development in a big organization. And they suggested to me that my final year project should be to look at how leaders handle paradoxes. And I was doing computational modeling of that with neural networks, which now is very famous, Chris, because of AI.
Yeah.
But this was in 1998, probably, or 1999.
Before it was cool.
So I was doing AI neural network modeling of paradoxical thinking processes and leaders. Where are we, 2024? 25 years ago. And it's like suddenly everyone's saying, well, AI is this big new thing. That's a paradox in itself. What is currently new has actually
been
old.
Yeah,
it's a really old
coming through. And
neural networks is a really, really old technology.
Yeah.
So I was studying, and the guy who was running leadership development at this organization, his posit to me was that the very best leaders are those that are most able to handle paradoxes and to deal with the paradoxical nature of organizational life. For example, every organization's there to make money, isn't it, somehow? But we all know that money, isn't that just greed? So your organization doesn't survive unless you make money. And the more money you make, really the better you're doing. But we all know that
there's more to
we shouldn't be a servant of money, and money isn't really the ultimate. So there's a tension. And if you can't move through that as a leader, you'll get stuck. You'll either become too pro-money or too anti-money, but you need to be able to handle that. You need both to have a successful organization, even though perhaps furthering the causes in the world and being capitalistically successful compete with each other.
Yeah. So the best leaders are able to handle and grapple with these paradoxes. It's not something we really talk about a lot, even in learning and development. We talk about communication, we talk about handling conflict, we talk about teamwork, but we don't really talk about paradoxes.
No.
So can you break down maybe the different types of paradox we might come across?
Yeah, I mean, one that I find fascinating in specifically leadership development is there is a principle of commitment to consistency, which is that we want, as great managers and leaders, to be steady, consistent, fair, to do next year what we did last year, to run this meeting similar to how we ran that meeting, to treat this employee in a similar way to how we treat that team member. But we also believe that the best leaders are able to flex their style to adapt to individuals and situations. So we hold two mutually competing views. One is that the best leaders are fair and consistent, and the other, the best leaders aren't actually fair because they don't treat everybody the same, and they're not consistent because they don't handle every situation
or interaction
consistently
the same. Yeah.
So the best leaders are therefore both fair and consistent and adaptable and emotionally intelligent. Those two things are entirely incompatible.
And it's not that we necessarily have to choose which one are you going to be. It's that those are attention to hold.
Well, I posit you to give me some advice, Chris.
Yeah.
I've got to go to a meeting, and I've got 5 team members there, and it's a meeting we have every week. And I know that a couple of those team members are under pressure, but everyone's got the same deliverables. Should I be fair and hold everyone to account, taking into fact that everyone has different situations going on, we've just got to perform? Or should I be lenient and say, well, 3 of you are doing well, 2 of you not, but I understand why. Let's not worry about it this month. If I was a sales manager, what should I do, Chris?
You've got to find a way of approaching that paradox of needing to be consistent and needing to be adaptable.
Yeah.
And we can talk about perhaps the different approaches you could take to handling that paradox, but it's a really difficult.
I think that's why
really
sometimes we
difficult
feel trapped as leaders.
Yeah.
There's the assumptions we should challenge is the best leaders. If we were to go and challenge that and say, well, actually, let's you've said the best leaders are consistent, stable, and the best leaders are. How do you quantify what the best leaders are? What you're saying is a selection of leaders are,
or
and
the visible ones, or the famous ones.
A subset of leaders are consistent, and another subset are emotionally empathetic and agile. Is it true that the group of leaders that flip between those two states outperform everybody else? Possibly not. So we could also challenge the assumptions of the paradox and say, well, we mustn't take those assumptions as the base.
Yep, and your context as well. Does your team and your teams want you to be that kind of leader?
Yeah.
We're saying the best leaders, or in general, people want both, but actually your organization might massively prefer a different type of leader.
A great classic example. So we talk a lot about authentic leadership, which is the leadership where I'm fully myself, but I've got a job here. I represent an organization. That organization has processes and policies, systems, principles and goals. So let's say I go to that meeting and I've got my sales manager meeting, and I've got my sales team, and I've got the 3 that are doing well and the 2 that are having a difficult time for whatever reason outside of work. Should I be the authentic leader, or should I be the take on the job role that I have for my company? And what do I do when those 2 are incompatible? When my authentic leadership style and my office that I hold compete with each other. These are difficult.
I think this is why we're talking about paradox, because if we haven't got an approach to that kind of thing, you go into that meeting and you have that kind of internal battle of, I'm trying to be accommodating, but I'm also trying to be fair and be consistent across the board. Yeah. And you have that internal battle during a meeting and it comes out in the wrong way. Yeah. Or we flip between them and people get a mixed message of...
People get a mixed message,
he's saying he's trying to be fair, but he's also seeming quite unfair.
Yeah, yeah.
Or seeming quite harsh.
Yeah, I mean, what should you have a favourite child?
We know you shouldn't.
You know you shouldn't?
Do you?
Possibly everybody does, you know?
I've got one, but I've only got one child so far, so...
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've got a favourite child, but certainly employees, you at work, you should try to generate close relationships with people, shouldn't you? Get to know them.
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean you then have favourites? And people that you're actually you're closer to than others that you might prefer?
Yeah. Studies show it helps to have a best friend at work, but that's favouritism, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is organisational life. I think it's worth bringing up one also on a strategy side, and this was really valuable to me when I was starting out in consultancy as well. Lots of organizations oscillate between strategies. And for example, we work for one big multinational company that sells and services elevators. Okay. Other good elevators available. Schindler's Lifts, not the film.
Not Schindler's List.
No, but the Schindler Company is a phenomenal organisation, extremely successful, and I'm not going to mention anything that's not in the public domain, so no confidence is broken. Privately owned, family owned, and I'm sure that if you do your research on the Schindler family, you'll find out that they're doing all right. Yeah, but their company installs lifts and services, and over the years, the strategy will flip between, what should we focus on? Should we really focus on installing and new projects, or servicing and sustainable revenue? And when the CEOs come and go, or when the heads of sales come and go, the strategy, all you can really do on strategy is either continue the old one, which doesn't make you seem a great leader, or you can suggest a change for the new one. And this has happened in lots of companies I work for as well. BMW Group, when I was working there, one leader's all about growth, and then the next one comes in is all about margin, and then the next one's all about growth, and the next one's all about margin. And we often find that on strategy level, we oscillate between those two. Our company, for example, we're a services business, and we do bespoke learning and development, but every consultancy secretly wants to become a product company, because when you think about products, you think, oh, this is brilliant. We don't have to customize them. We don't have to make them. All we have to do is sell them. But in general, service companies aren't great at becoming product companies. So, these paradoxes we face on a strategy level, on a personal level, and that they're a part of navigating through organizational life.
Yeah, and I think what we're getting into there is some of the pitfalls of paradoxes, and if we haven't thought about them, if we haven't become aware that is a paradox that we've got to hold intention or have an approach for, we can fall down in the face of a paradox.
100%, and especially, for example, is there a right answer? In general, there isn't. In general, there is not a right answer at work. So there are just choices and consequences. Yet, if you go to meetings, if you work with people, they're looking for the right answer in meetings.
Board meetings, typically.
They're looking for the right decision, whereas really there isn't a right decision. There's a spectrum of decisions. Even simple again, come to hiring. Should we hire person A? Well, they will have strengths and limitations. If we've got A, B, and C, which should we hire? Well, they all have strengths and limitations. They will all have different strengths and limitations. There isn't a right answer there. There's only choices and consequences. But if you think about how decisions are made, it's often we're looking for the right decision, a bit like we're looking for truth.
And that isn't always there.
It's not always there.
There isn't always that place you can come to where you go, this is the right answer. And even when you've hired that person or people, you still might not have a way of working out whether it's the right thing to do a year down the line.
They might also change.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, so if you think about looking for consistency, people change. People move house, go through life stages, are excited to join an organization, find out what it's really like, and then are less enthusiastic. They want to leave a job, so they leave, and then when they get somewhere else, they think, actually, you know what? I actually kind of preferred it back there, and they hanker for home. You know, there's many things that go on. So yeah, the sort of feeling that decision making is sort of cold and clinical is one of the paradigms that we fall into, and maybe we should just think about choices with consequences. Yeah,
and one of the things that we can fall into is a sense that we could be doing a better job because we feel like that right answer or perfect path, perfect solution to all our problems is out there, and we might not be finding it.
Is that why I feel like I should always be doing a better job, Chris?
I mean, we all could be, couldn't we?
Could we?
Could anyone not do better?
Could you?
Yeah,
I could.
I think so.
I could.
I think so. With the right factors, internal and external.
Yeah.
There's not many people in the world that can do a little bit better.
No, I mean, there's another nice paradox, isn't there? Leaders in organizations are by definition further away from customers. So who really knows what your organization is doing for your customers? Well, it's the person on the ground. If we go to, we work with M&S. If they've done brilliantly in the last year to turn their business around the last couple of years, and they've finally got fashion right. But if you'd been on the shop floor, you'd have known that the last few years they weren't getting fashion right. And you surely would think, well, surely with all that knowledge of the marketplace, they can get fashion right, but they struggle to get it right. And then they manage to, with changes of leadership and other things, to get fashion right. But the people on the shop floor know what the customer wants. People in the ballroom, we're sometimes guessing.
So one of those pitfalls that we can avoid is that addiction to resolve things and find right answers, and find the tension there and be able to grapple with it. What are the other things in work and life that you see as paradoxes that we've got to find a way to deal with?
One of the ones that's quite challenging, I think, is the concept of work-life balance. In some countries, they actually call it life-work balance, which I think is already a better way round. But again, a bit like we were talking before, these two things will compete against each other to some extent. You might be able to get a holistic solution, but you may also find that actually you can't, and that you can spend much of your working day wishing you were a better parent, or you spent more time in the gym or whatever, and then when you get home, you can feel that you wish you'd done a bit more work, or you'd performed higher at work, or you haven't been distracted. So these basic tenets. It's almost like the 10 Commandments, but there's basic tenets of business life which we subscribe to, which actually, if you philosophically look into them, you'll find out they're paradoxes, and therefore they're not things that will easily be resolved. Yeah.
Yeah, so work-life balance is one of those. What are the other things maybe in business that are those kind of tensions that...
Well, one of them is, will you ever get paid what you're worth, Chris? So, I mean, I always joke about this with the team, but everyone wants a pay rise. It's rare. I've never yet had anybody approach me and say, I'm actually being paid more than what I'm worth. So I'd like to take a pay
based
cut
on current performance, I think I'd like to go down a pay level. Please.
Yeah, could I? I've had people ask to step down a managerial level.
Yeah,
but it's very rarely that people are truly happy with what they're paid. Another one that I think is interesting in work is all the information around employee engagement, which there's a high correlation, isn't there, between employee engagement and successful organizations. But I believe that the HR department world in general forgets that employee engagement is a consequence, and then tries to tackle it in its own way. And when people are most engaged is when they're doing challenging and interesting work with a good career path, with a great manager, and it's all fitting together well, not because of some employee engagement activities that are, being put in place. So I see employee engagement as a consequence, not something you can really tackle directly. And we see it here. If the business is flying, employee engagement will be high. Everyone's busy, everyone's working hard, things are going well. If we're in a quiet quarter, tricky marketplace, tough sales quarter, then surprisingly, the employee engagement might drop. But why? Why is it dropping? It's because it won't be solved by initiatives. It'll be solved by being successful at achieving our goals, being profitable, being fast-paced, delivering, getting results, being satisfied with our work, being challenged, not by a town hall and some free biscuits,
Yeah, exactly. And I'm interested in your cognitive scientist by training.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the kind of project you were doing there and how that applied to Paradox.
Yeah, that was interesting. So me and my academic partners in this enterprise looked at how we could model through neural networks paradoxical thinking, and we looked at paradoxical data sets. As an example, so actually the one we used is good. So tell me a couple of things about what it means to be a bird, Chris.
So birds have wings.
Yeah.
They lay eggs.
Yeah. Okay, keep going.
They've got a beak.
Yeah.
What else? That's pretty consistent. Feathers. Most of the time, I think all the time. Typically 2 legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else?
I'm just waiting for the and they fly most of the time.
Well, most of them.
I'm trying not to set off the QI klaxon.
Yeah, exactly. So we used neural networks to do this kind of classification algorithm on different data sets, with different attributes, keeping back the ostriches and
the penguins.
And then we set up these neural networks to learn to classify across the different attributes. Is this a bird? And trained it to classify. With these data sets, so 2 legs could be a bird or a human being, right?
Yeah.
So you put in the
logic doesn't work that way around,
and the neural net will work out how to classify it. And then, but the question is, when you then put in the example that doesn't fit the stereotype, the paradoxical example, how quickly can that neural network adapt? And we tested different learning algorithms, back propagation, for example. Different algorithms took different amounts of time to be able to handle the paradox that penguins, which can't fly, are birds. And We even have at work a penguin to remind us of this.
Yeah.
It is a bird.
It's the paradox.
It cannot fly.
Unless it's underwater, in which case
It can swim.
it can swim really well.
But most people
Basically
think they'll
flying
make
underwater.
a fish or a mammal.
Yeah.
So the speed of learning was the thing that we were testing, and we then looked at that. That's what leaders need to be able to do. If I can't learn how to deal with these paradoxes, then I'll be stuck classifying an ostrich as not a bird.
Yeah.
Again, thinking about, is this a successful team? Well, I need to be able to understand that there's different versions of success. Some of them compete with each other. It could be a team of successful individuals. That would be a successful team. Or it could be a team that succeeds collectively. But both of those things could be a successful team. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer.
No. But what are those things we can do to help us approach paradoxes? Because like I say, if we haven't got a way of dealing with it, then we're going to fall head first into pitfalls, and we want to make these work for us because it will make us better leaders and better employees.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is better to spot it. And I'm minded of one of my other lecturers we were doing some software design, and he was brilliant. He said, by the way, at some point in your working life, you will be asked to address a problem that's computationally so complex that they're called MP hard problems, but computationally so complex that current computers won't be able to give you a right answer before it will take them longer than the age of the universe to come up to an answer. An example is like the traveling salesman problem, visiting 100 different cities. What's the quickest way? Well, there's n to the power of 100 different ways. To compute it would be so big that you can only make it a best guess, not get the right answer. Anyway, what he said was, I'm going to train you in this now, but at some point in your career, you'll be asked to solve these problems. And if you say yes, you'll fail. So the main thing is, can you spot this is happening? And I think this is the thing for leaders is, can you spot the paradoxes? Can you spot when you're being asked to make a choice between complementary methodologies, strategies that don't need a yes/no answer? I mean, Schindler, for example, they should make money from both selling elevators and servicing them, shouldn't they? They shouldn't. They don't necessarily need to have a priority.
Yeah.
And probably deciding which strategy is to do, it might not be the right answer. It might be better to follow the marketplace and say in country X we need to do service, and in country Y we need to install new elevators. Quite hard to install new elevators if there's no construction happening, right? So we could say, well, there's no real right answer to should we be a products company or a service.
Is this where we can simply straddle the paradox?
Yeah, we've got to be able to. That's what we call it. So straddle it. So yeah, both of these are going to be right, possibly at different times. Let's go with it. Another example is outframing, which is to take a bigger viewpoint. So this is again, for example, in the example we're using before, choices have consequences. This is a method of outframing, saying like we don't need to resolve this paradox. We just, whatever we do, we should commit to it and just see if we can make the best of it.
So there's a wider perspective.
Yeah, take a wider perspective.
Take a look up and see what's going on a bit wider. Yeah.
Exactly.
What else?
Another thing I like to do is try and synthesize. So it might be that we've got competing aims that aren't resolved together, but we try to do both. And think about how we can get the best from both put together. I'm thinking about examples. For example, that's the basic hiring choice. Well, why don't you hire both people for 2.5 days a week and have 2 part-timers with different strengths? Do a job share.
Yeah. That would be a way of synergizing.
You could synergize that. You could synergize that. That's maybe not true synergize, but that's taking the best from both, looking for a different answer. It's a bit of outframing, a bit of synergizing. And then, I mean, there's in everyday life we have ways of dealing with these things. Toss a coin, lots of research on decision making shows that an early decision that you can correct is better than no decision for too long. So maybe just toss a coin and go for it, and if you and stay open-minded, and if you need to adapt. Again, this can take away the emotional part, the human part, thinking I need to be the one that makes the right decision. I want to resolve this.
Yeah.
And I think the acceptance is another. There's a great psychotherapeutic school of thought, for example, that marriages are supposed to be difficult. And if it wasn't difficult, it wouldn't be a marriage. If there wasn't difficult times or uncomfortable ups and downs, in that case, you're maybe not being true to each other and to yourself. I would say it's the same at work. Work is possibly supposed to have difficulty in it and
unsolvable problems, maybe.
It's supposed to possibly have relationship conflicts as well. And possibly if you don't have those, maybe that isn't how it's supposed to be. But we should accept that is what work is. Work does have failure. It does have conflict. It does have lack of performance. It does have mistakes. And if we can accept that is part of what work is, then we will be able to make progress. If we've got a kind of perfectionist streak and we can't accept those things, well, maybe we fall into that Jungian trap we were talking about earlier, where we hate them so much we actually can't recognise that we're doing them.
And as we close out the podcast, before we do, I wanted to ask about the most valuable paradoxes. We've talked about a number in work and life. What are the most valuable ones to have an approach for in leadership and in our work?
Well, I think the either or on strategy is very, very valuable to bear in mind. The oscillating, characterized as products or services company, but growth or profit. To have in mind that if you're asked to achieve both high growth and high growth in profit in organizations, you probably need a new product or service that's new to the marketplace. But if you're working in a business, it's very easy to say yes to those things. Yeah, we'll get high growth and we'll increase the profit margin. Well, it's just basically not true. It's not how the world works. High margin and growth comes through really cool new products or services into a sector. And unless you're the market leader, you possibly haven't got those. So, there's that either or, the sort of oscillating strategy. These are they're one of the ones I look out for. Another one is this thing about right decisions, hiring, office relocation, branding. I mean, we can do research, but in many cases there isn't a right answer, and therefore don't get caught procrastinating and delaying, and equally don't get caught rationalizing and arguing yourself into a corner. Often you may not do any better than tossing a coin and just moving forward.
It's really helpful. If you're enjoying this episode, do give it a like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I feel like this is the point where I do a Stephen Bartlett style. 90% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. So we'd like to change that. Hit the subscribe button now. What are you doing? You've listened this far. Must like it a little bit.
If you do hit the like or subscribe button, that will not only make us very happy, but it will contribute to the success of future podcasts.
And leave us a review as well, wherever you get your podcasts, preferably a positive one.
Preferably positive, but we don't really mind. Also, don't forget to share with a friend. If you found this intriguing or valuable, do also share with a friend and see if you can get them to listen along.
And before we go, Jonna, how are we helping leaders at Interactive Workshops? How are we helping leaders in organisations all over the world grapple with the difficulties and unsolvable problems of life?
Well, I wouldn't get stuck into this at Leadership 101. I think there's a lot of topics to cover about how to be a good leader and a good manager before you get to paradoxes. But you will face them. And therefore, having the awareness that you'll be posed seemingly innocent, yet fiendishly difficult questions allows you to start to spot those. As you grow in leadership, you'll find that a lot of what you're expected to do is to live with those paradoxes. And as my mentor said at the start, the leaders that are able to do that best tend to be the ones that thrive the most. And I can't back that up with stats, but that's what we looked at.
That seems to be the case. Thank you, Jonna, for joining me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
We should wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
See you soon.
See you soon.